And so, in conclusion, I'd just like to say once again that it be Bob Clothier who taught me everything I knows about both English and video production. Thanks, Bob. So Bob Clothier. What can we say about Bob Clothier? Or as I knew him way back in the day, Mr. Clothier. I actually started Ryan back in the mid-70s, just about exactly the same time as Bob started there. Of course, it only took me 4 years to get out, and it's taken Bob 42. I'm afraid that does not reflect well at all on our parochial school system. It does, however, prove that Archbishop Ryan never went in for that whole concept of social promotion, whereby Bob and other slow kids like him could have advanced along with his peers. So both Bob and I started at Ryan in the 70s. And for those who were around at that time, at least those whose brain cells weren't all killed off by the hairspray, the 70s were not known as the most attractive or fashionable decade. And Bob could have been their poster boy. From his Philly afro to this caterpillar-like mustache that he stole off one of the village people, Bob embodied the 70s look. He was a distinctive-looking individual. Maybe we can put up a picture of Bob from that time, that era. Is that there he is. Well, I'm not sure. Is that Bob, or is this one Bob? I don't know. One of those is Bob. All I know is that none of us who were at Ryan at the time would have been the least bit surprised if we walked back into school some Friday afternoon after hours and found Bob roller dancing down the hallways singing a Bee Gees song. As for the school itself, I'm sure it's much different now that you've let boys and girls cross the sacred demilitarized zone. But Archbishop Ryan for boys of that bygone era was not the most advanced or well-equipped, well-funded school in the world. I mean, we had the basics. We had the 3 R's, reading, writing, and religion. But other than that, the facilities weren't the greatest. Our history books, I think, only covered up until the French and Indian War. Our computer lab consisted of a broken ham radio and an abacus. In biology class, the only creatures we ever got to dissect were things that Frank Morris was able to capture down by the cafeteria. But one thing the school did have was a media lab and a TV studio. So that was a big investment. And of course they wanted, they really needed somebody to entrust this with. And of course they chose Bob because he, compared to all the other staff at Ryan, he by far had the most media experience. And at that time, that meant that he was the only one who had a television with both UHF and VHF channels. In fact, Joanne told me that Bob still has that TV. Along with every other accoutrement from the media world over the last 100 years, including, for some reason, one of Walter Cronkite's socks. Actually, Bob did have some real media experience. And this is true. I remember him in class one day playing an audition tape he had done to try to get a radio advertising gig. And, Bob obviously had the face for radio, so he would have been a natural. And in order to try to get this, he did an audition tape. He drove out to a parking lot somewhere, and he stood outside with a tape recorder, and he read his script into the mic while Joanne sat in the car beeping at him. And Bob told us that the honking was all part of the script, but we knew Joanne was just totally embarrassed, and she was honking for him to get the hell back in the car so they could leave. Technology was always very important to Bob. He gave us an excellent grounding in the history of media. We got to do radio plays and things like that. But he brought us right through to the latest in television broadcasting. And the future was always so important to him, and the technology, and especially the most modern ways man had to express themselves and to communicate. So I can only imagine what Bob has been doing in recent years for his students. He what? He started teaching Latin? Never mind. Aside from a detour into marine science, everything I've done in my career has revolved around subjects that Bob Clothier taught. My books and all the articles I've written have been in English, or at least my version of it. And I've done a lot of work in all other kinds of media. But really, there's been very few things that have been as much fun as the projects I got to work on in Bob's media class. And he, gave me an amazing amount of leeway and kind of free rein to do things in there. Just for one example, he let me shoot a sequel to Jaws about a toilet shark that was attacking people in Archbishop Ryan restrooms. I wrote and performed some other productions during that class that I know Bob wanted to broadcast to the rest of the school to show them what we were capable of doing in his media class. But I always tended to take things maybe a joke or two too far for that particular audience. And I remember once doing a newscast where I did a report on the latest summer fashions for nuns that would have gotten us both kicked out of school. But as only the best teachers do, Bob never tried to squelch anything. He only encouraged and inspired that kind of creativity. And I will always remember and thank him for that. At graduation, they always talk in those platitudes about how no matter what you end up doing, no matter where you end up going, that your high school always stays with you. And after graduating Ryan, I moved away, and I've since lived all over the world, in Europe and the Caribbean, and all over the United States, and even in far end of nowhere places like the Republic of Maldives in the Indian Ocean. And it's true that no matter where I was, no matter how far away I moved, Archbishop Ryan was always right there, sending me fundraising letters. The U.S. Marshals should be so good at finding people. But listen, Bob Clothier inspired me to a life in freelance media work. I have no money, or else I wouldn't have to move so often. And I wouldn't be filming this in a Unabomber shack in the middle of the woods on an island in the Pacific Northwest. My whole retirement plan is hoping that Toilet Shark gets green-lighted by Universal. So really, you guys should focus on the Ryan guys who were smart enough to go to Swenson and became plumbers. They have the cash. But back to the other Bob Clothier. Bob, you actually put truth to those platitudes. Your inspiration and encouragement did stay with me through all those years and all those places, no matter what I was doing. And even though I might let a decade or so slip by between contacts, you were always there, whether it was for a letter of recommendation, some positive feedback on a project I was working on, or just as my connection to the Ryan family. You have all the qualities that make for a wonderful teacher. You're caring, your fortitude, your endless curiosity, your obvious love of your subjects and your students, and fortunately for me, a great sense of humor. Teaching is the most important job in the world, and you were terrific at it. I feel sorry for the kids who won't get to have you as a teacher, but on behalf of those who did, thank you. And so, Bob, congratulations on your retirement. I wish you all the best. I hope you enjoy every minute of it. Please keep in touch. If you ever need to find me, just ask the fundraising people where I'm at. And even though I had the great misfortune of missing out on your Latin class, I'd like to say bene vivere, and thank you again. And hey, you obviously still have a face for radio, so if you ever get bored and want to get back into the game, I'm sure Joanne would just love to sit in the car and beep at you for a while. Thanks, Bob.